For me, it's like, yes, there's a John Wick movie, you know? I mean, let's just start with like, and hopefully we won't let them down. But I mean, all I can tell you is we made this feast of a movie with all of our hearts and love and passion, and hopefully people will enjoy it. You know, the action, the humor, the takeaways, the ideas, the new characters, the cinema, the sound. But really, it's just John Wick. It's just John Wick. All the time, all day. Like, I don't know, I feel like these films are unique and special in a way, and I mean, John Wick Chapter 4 is no joke.
We've seen it 1,000 times. A new exciting movie comes out and becomes a huge success. People go and see it, and it goes on to become one of the biggest movies of the year. So a sequel is commissioned, maybe even a trilogy. Time goes on, the sequel numbers go higher, the brand remains, but the quality declines. Movie after movie sees the stakes and scale of the series get bigger and bigger as it constantly tries to outdo itself until finally the product is almost unrecognizable compared to its relatively humble beginnings. John Wick is one of the very few exceptions to this pattern. After 4 films and with 2 spin-offs and a potential 5th movie in the works, the John Wick series has done what almost every other franchise has failed to do: make multiple sequels that are as good, if not even better, than the original. So let's try and figure out how John Wick has managed to remain so consistently good, and explore what lessons this series has for writers and filmmakers lucky enough to be making a sequel. But before we do that, we need to look at,
God willing, we'll all meet again in Spaceballs 2, to search for more money.
Now, because this will inevitably come up in the comments, I'm not saying every sequel is bad. Of course they're not. Film history has dozens of exceptional sequels that most people agree are superior to the original. Off the top of my head, you have Empire Strikes Back, Terminator 2, The Last Crusade, Fury Road, Harry Potter 3, Spider-Man 2, The Winter Soldier, Mission Impossible Fallout, The Dark Knight, and best of all, Paddington 2. The Lord of the Rings is of course in a category entirely of its own alongside only Toy Story and Back to the Future, where every single movie in the series is equally perfect. But despite every one of the sequels I just mentioned being superior to their original, subsequent installments in many of those very same franchises failed to reach those lofty heights. And when you look further afield, the trend of sequel-itis is clear. For every Spider-Man 2, you also have a Rambo 5, or a Transformers The Last Knight, or a Secrets of Dumbledore. Movies that are creaking under the increasing weight of their franchise and becoming bigger and bigger until finally they just collapse. This is because sequels feel like the action, the drama, the set pieces, the world building all need expanding. And there is nothing wrong with that. People returning to a story generally do so because they want to learn more about it. The Two Towers vastly expands the world of Middle-earth. Empire draws us into the politics and scale of the galaxy. Spider-Man 2 deepens the character tension between the 3 leads by building naturally on their arcs from the first film. But where most sequels fail is that the filmmakers and producers are so focused on delivering a bigger spectacle that they lose sight of what made the original special in the first place. Die Hard is the perfect example of this. Oh, people liked this small, tightly written and grounded action movie about one lone cop facing down a group of terrorists? Well, fast forward 5 movies and he's involved in a vast international underworld conspiracy involving nuclear weapons. At least I think that's what it's about. I haven't actually seen Die Hard 5 and never plan to, but I think my point still stands that whatever this is light years away from McClane's origins. Bigger is not always better, but the sequel feels like it needs to be bigger, and so bigger it becomes. And as the sequel numbers go up, this becomes exponential. The sequel to the sequel needs to be bigger still, until before you know it, you have James Bond surfing a tsunami or The Rock doing this. Actually, you know what? I take that one back. That was awesome. But anyway, enough about sequels. We're here to talk about
that fucking nobody is John Wick.
In case you've been living in a hall of mirrors for the last 10 years, John Wick is a series of action films starring Keanu Reeves as the eponymous character, a legendary hitman who comes out of retirement in the first film to seek revenge on Theon Greyjoy and his mates after they murder his dog. As we follow his brutal journey of vengeance, we are plunged into the secret underworld he once inhabited, mainly through the portal of the Continental Hotel. And besides this world building and the universally excellent performances, the series is popular because of its astonishingly well choreographed action. The director, Chad Stahelski, was a professional stunt person for much of his career, including doubling for Keanu Reeves on the Matrix films, and he brought this experience to directing the action scenes in John Wick.
They know action really well. And they know the genre. You know, they're so knowledgeable on the cinema of action and character.
The film draws heavily on the visual and fighting styles of classic martial arts movies, but it introduces an ultra-violent aspect and sets the fights against a modern and hyper-stylized backdrop, with the frequent addition of guns. Lots of guns. When the first movie came out in 2014, it was coming off the back of a decade of Jason Bourne ripoffs that didn't understand how those movies did action properly, and instead thought a shaky camera and fast editing could compensate for poor fight or stunt choreography. This was of course famously represented by that scene in Taken 3 that has 15 cuts in 6 seconds to show Liam Neeson jumping over a fence. The movie that scene is from came out the same year as John Wick, which by refreshing contrast gave us long, unedited wide shots that fully showed the geography of the action and the skill of the stunt work.
Our goal is to have the actors do as much as possible, so we can have the longest takes with them in action, and then we'll jump in if, you know, insurance, or we just feel that they're not going to be safe in something like a car hit or high fall or anything like that.
For example, okay, I'm going to stop it there before I get copyright claimed, but that one shot carries on for about another 30 seconds. So yeah, that was John Wick. And while it was moderately successful in theaters, it went on to become a slow burn hit that ended up making more money in home media sales than it did in its domestic box office run. Presumably as people told their friends to go and see this new action movie that has, you know, some good action. It was enough for a sequel to be greenlit, so fast forward 9 years and John Wick Chapter 4 has just come out. Like the 3 other films in the series, it has been met with pretty universal acclaim from audiences and critics alike, and has been drawing an impressive box office haul. But our question is how? How did John Wick, unlike so many action franchises, maintain its consistency of quality and even after 4 films, only be getting stronger?
John is a man of focus, commitment, sheer will.
We've already talked a little bit about why sequels tend to be worse than the originals, but let's focus on the reason that I think is the most important. Sequels are generally bad because they lose sight of why the original film connected with people in the first place. I mean, sure, they might have some other flaws in the production or writing that contribute, but I think it all comes back to that loss of focus. I mean, let's use an example from this year. Quantumania may have had a whole load of flaws common to the other recent MCU Phase 4 properties, but at its core, I think its poor reception was down to the fact that people connected with Ant-Man because while the other MCU heroes were having fights like this, he was having fights like this. So suddenly putting him in the middle of a multiverse scale story just felt wrong. It wasn't consistent with the small scale, light-hearted nature of the original that made it such a success. The issue wasn't necessarily the fact that they escalated the scale of the threat or raised the stakes of Scott's story, it was the fact that placing him in such a world was not consistent with the things the audiences connected to his character for when they watched the first movie. By contrast, the Mission Impossible movies are a great example of the sequels improving in quality despite continually raising the stakes, because raising the stakes is consistent with the fundamental premise of the series. So even though each movie features a bigger and crazier stunt than the last one, it is all still consistent with the overall appeal of these movies because they are all still firmly grounded in reality because they are done for real. The moment Mission Impossible decides to do a Die Hard 4 and use some CGI to make Tom Cruise take down a fighter jet with a truck or something, then that would be the moment the series lost focus. And to prove this point, Mission Impossible 2 is generally regarded as the worst entry in the series because it went too far in that direction. Which is ironic to say in this video essay considering how much John Woo's filmography and work developing fight choreography in the 80s and 90s had such a massive influence on the John Wick movies, but that's not the point. The point is that his style wasn't in step with the world Mission Impossible had established in the first movie, so MI3 had to drag the series back onto a more grounded course. Since then, the films have understood that the appeal of these films is not just the action, it's the fact that the action is real and better than anything else they can see in the theatre. Except that is, in the John Wick movies. Movie after movie, these films managed to do what sequels are supposed to do. They delivered bigger, more exciting set pieces, they expanded the world of the story, and raised the stakes the protagonist has to face. But the reason the John Wick sequels managed to do this successfully where so many others have failed is that they did all of this without losing that focus on the core appeal of these films.
I know Kung Fu.
Show me.
Let's start with the action. And before we get into the craftsmanship of it, let's take a moment to acknowledge what Chad Stahelski was trying to do.
There's a golden rule that very few even directors know. There's no separation between story and action. The story doesn't stop because you start driving a car or start shooting a gun. But the most important thing about action is, do you love the character doing it?
Yeah.
Or do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you interested in them? The trick with action is always make great characters that you care about, then put them in the shit.
As a stunt performer, he understands that stunt work is just another type of acting, and therefore another means of storytelling. So he brought a deep understanding of both the technical craft as well as the creative and storytelling potential of quality stunt work to the production of John Wick. So while Marvel is off telling directors not to worry about action scenes because they'll be handled by another team, Stahelski knew that the story and character is intrinsically tied to the action. And the result was a level of craftsmanship and talent that we very rarely see in a Western production. But it was only possible to showcase this because Reeves himself was performing the vast majority of that stunt work.
Instead of just training an actor to do choreography, we just made Keanu pretty much one of the choreographers, one of our stuntmen. We kind of threw away the actor thing and just trained him as a stunt guy.
Because Reeves can put himself into the fight, and because most of his co-stars are martial arts legends in their own right, it means you can deliver scenes like this, where he and the stunt crew directly engage with each other in full view of the audience. There's no camera trickery here. We, the audience, get a full view of the action and the fight and of Keanu doing it all himself. The filmmakers know that this is the core of these movies, so when designing set pieces for the sequels, they knew how important it was to keep the action grounded in realistic, genuine performances by the stunt crew and Keanu himself.
We talked a lot about how could we make this one bigger and meaner, and we settled on the idea that we need to make Keanu better.
Making Keanu better as a stunt performer opened up a whole world of options for making the action more exciting while still keeping it grounded in reality. So the sequels make greater use of locations and sets, they introduce different weapons or add vehicles. They use props creatively like the famous pencil scene, or add speed like the knife fight, or introduce additional challenges for Wick to overcome like the bulletproof armor in Chapter 3. All of these elements give the action a fresh and exciting feeling and raise the stakes of the scene without compromising the integrity of the series or losing sight of the core appeal of these movies. But the appeal of John Wick goes further than the action because these films are absolutely stunning to look at. Every single frame is dripping with style and color and light and design that gives the whole movie a totally unique aesthetic. These films have such a unique and distinctive visual style and aesthetic, and even though the sequels take us around the world, they manage to keep this style consistently gorgeous across all 4 movies.
You and Dan, your DP, masters of a wide.
Kevin Cavanaugh's a big part of this. He's my production designer. So that's the magic trilogy, right? That's the 3 of us that spend more time scouting than I think anybody. Like I drive them nuts with how much I scout and how much we sit. We'll have lighting meetings like 6 months out. Like, this is the color that has to be in the movie.
In a film that is primarily about telling the story through physical performances, Stahelski and the rest of the team understand that this goes beyond what the actors are doing. It needs to be conveyed in every single frame of the movie because the setting is part of the story. But finally, we need to acknowledge the heart of these films being Keanu himself. He is the perfect actor to bring this world to life because so much of the mythology of John Wick is tied to what we already know about Keanu's background as an actor.
You love Keanu, like not Wick, you love Keanu
Yeah.
being John Wick. You love Hiroyuki Sanada, that's why you love the guy before he's even the character.
Like Sean Connery in The Rock or Michael Keaton in Birdman or Rowan Atkinson in Johnny English, movies often take advantage of the real-life associations the audience has with the actor to help build up the mythology of their character. Oh, and John Wick isn't afraid to acknowledge this explicitly.
Guns. Lots of guns.
But beyond the connections with Keanu's previous roles, so much of Wick's character is conveyed silently through his physical acting. This expression, this glance, this walk, and this final ruthless kill all give us so much more weight and depth to his character and the world he inhabits than could be achieved through dialogue. He understands this is a physical story. In Chapter 4, a nearly 3-hour movie, Keanu only says about 400 words, because this is a film series that knows that a scene like this does not need a verbal explanation. Keanu Reeves could have easily been given more dialogue or backstory in the John Wick sequels, but he understood, like the filmmakers do, that this is not the appeal of his character. The less we know about John Wick, the more interesting he is. The sequels know this and don't try to change it by fundamentally altering the role his character plays in the story. Instead, they develop him the same way they do in the original film, through his actions, through visual storytelling, and by making him confront new challenges in new and interesting ways, and by forcing him to make increasingly difficult choices. Choices that have bigger and bigger consequences.
What have you done? Finished it.
And so we come to...
It is a pleasure having you with us again, Mr. Wick.
I'm going to be upfront and say that I'm approaching the Continental trailer and Ballerina news with cautious optimism. For those unaware, Ballerina is a spin-off movie set in the John Wick universe starring Ana de Armas, while Continental is a prequel miniseries set in the 1970s. We just got a trailer for that, but because it's a miniseries, a prequel, and looks like it will be quite self-contained, I want to instead focus on Ballerina. The movie has just been given a release date in 2024, and we'll see Wickverse regulars like the late Lance Reddick, Ian McShane, and even Keanu himself reprise their roles. After her absolutely standout performances in Knives Out and No Time to Die, de Armas has more than proven that she has the acting and action chops to helm a John Wick movie. Chad Stahelski is producing, and I have every confidence in him to make sure that the spin-off lives up to the high expectations audiences have for John Wick. But... this video essay has been about what made the original John Wick so special, and how the series has managed to keep that special something consistent across its sequels. And I'm worried that these spin-offs could see the symptoms of sequel-itis inevitably spread to the world of Wick. To be fair, we still know very little about the film, so in the lead up to its release, I will be looking for signs that Ballerina is remaining true to the things I have spent this entire video talking about. Like I just said, de Armas did show off her action skills brilliantly in No Time to Die, and the choreography in that was actually kinda similar to what we have seen in John Wick. But for Ballerina to really feel like John Wick, this needs cranking up to 11, and de Armas will need to be the one doing the bulk of her stunt work and fights throughout the entire movie, just like Keanu did. But overall, I do have confidence in de Armas based on her track record. My main cause for trepidation is the fact that Len Wiseman is directing. And while I'm absolutely confident that Stahelski will continue to exert a lot of creative control over the production, a rare case of studio interference probably being a good thing, the fact is that Wiseman does not have a strong action track record. He hasn't directed a feature film since 2012's Total Recall remake, and besides that, the film he is best known for is the very same Die Hard sequel I held up earlier as an example of a classic action series that has lost its way because of sequel-itis. But like I said before, I am optimistic that Stahelski will continue to steer the good ship Wick in the right direction, including this spin-off. But it's fair to say that there is a lot more riding on Ballerina than there was on John Wick Chapter 4. Indeed, because of the success of Chapter 4, there is even more pressure on de Armas, Wiseman, and Stahelski to bring this one home. I really hope they don't disappoint.
How was he?
He was a good dog. I have enjoyed his company.
Let's go home.